Hi, my name is Benedict. No doubt you're looking at this because you have seen that I have a new refill, a sand set out for propeller heads reason. In this case, it's really for reason 10 and on, because there's a fair amount of emphasis on Europa in particular, but some grain and various other bits and pieces in there which are reason 10. While technically you could run on much older versions, probably 6.5 or something like that, where you've got Thor, I don't really recommend you getting into this package just because there is so much emphasis on Europa in particular. So the name of the refill is Meadows of Synthesizer Sand. It is a pretty big name. I don't expect you to all walk around saying all of that, so if you are saying it, I will also accept W. Moss, which of course is Meadows of Synthesizer Sand. Slightly strange name, and it really is because I'm trying to differentiate in the market, if you want to know my marketing speak. Not that we're supposed to expose our marketing speak, but really, so many refills are based on a particular genre sound, you know, so like drill and dubstep or whatever, and that's cool, fine, there's a market for that. But generalist stuff, people often think, oh, well, why would I want it? It's general. Nobody wants to be general. And it's like, yeah, this is a generalist patch set because it's usable by anybody who's looking for a particular thing. And often when we're looking at synthesizer sounds, especially if we're not coming from a massively synthesizer or electronic musician background, we're often looking for synthesizer sounds to add layers into our mix, to fill out the sound, to handle extra harmonies and counter melodies that are straight, you know, two guitarist, bass player, drummer, singer don't automatically do. So keyboard synthesizers get pulled in, and at that point there's a certain style of sound that works really, really well, and they're actually not the same kind of sounds that you put right up the front of the mix for dubstep or whatever these genre things are. So that's why the slightly unusual name. It does not mean that you can't use any of these sounds in a lead kind of role. You've probably already watched the 1 minute lead-in piece for this. That's using 100% the sounds. So without too much more blabber, I'll walk you through some of the sounds. Some things I'll try and explain, otherwise I will try as much as is possible for me to move relatively quickly. Got the refill open. I've opened up All In, which is the sound that you hear at the beginning of that piece, called All In because basically I've got all the synthesizers, the main synthesizers from the Reason stable, all backed into one box and then popped through synchronous. In some ways, yes, it is a bit of a one-track pony. But I've built in a few options there to allow you to control what's going on. Some sounds in here have very little in the way of options because I don't see that that's really necessary, but quite a lot of sounds are designed so that they can be moved to suit your mix, and that's pretty important. So sometimes that's going to be as simple as just changing a filter or something obvious. Quite a few will have control of mod wheel to do things. Very much a texture sort of a sound. I think we can all work out what that's about. Oh, just so you can see, the chords player in here is solely so you can see what I'm playing. I've popped it into bass because it's a rather rather D50 type sound, but as you heard in the intro piece, it's moved in quite a lot of things. There are a few NNXT sounds or sample-based sounds, as is very typical for me. Don't expect great big multi-sampled sets. While they can have their charms, they don't appeal to me, and I don't love the unevenness of sound that you get across the keyboard, even if you've gone and sampled every single oscillator. For some reason it just doesn't quite gel for me, and a mix is always about gelling. It's not about saying, oh, this is technically perfect. It's about gelling, and I find this way it does it really well. So a single sample on C3 or C4 spread across the keyboard. Yeah, up the top sometimes it can get a little interesting, but I'm happy to work with that within a mix because, as I say, overall it kind of gels nicely. So a few of those, but don't expect tons of samples. They're just tones. Not a lot of bass sounds, quite a bit of brass. Now you will notice with quite a lot of the brass sounds that I'm not going to do much in the way of playing them with chords. And they can even be set up in such a way that they can be a little too loud when played with chords, rather than peaking at around -12. They'll go over because they're not really meant to be played with chords, even though they're polyphonic. Just if I turn them into a monophonic or a, mini mode mono sound, they don't behave quite right. So the idea with these is you've got a fair amount of versatility through velocity, and that you would still be playing a single voice line. If you want multi voices, yeah, you can play chords, but immediately that sounds very, very synthy, which is a mistake that a lot of synth players make when looking to create orchestral type sounds, is that they grab one set of strings and whack down as many keys as they can in some uber chord. It's not the way it works, because a cello at most can play 2 notes. So if you're playing 8 notes on your cello sound, it doesn't sound like a cello anymore, it sounds like a keyboard, because you're playing it like a keyboard. So when playing with orchestral type sounds, or sounds that might behave as though they were played by somebody, then look for that playing a single note. If we wanted to build this up into chords, which is not really what I would suggest with this sound, then we might be better off having 3 versions of the sound, or 3 versions of similar sounds, which is even better. So again, a fair amount of movement. It suggests it's perhaps a clarinet sound, and there are some clarinet elements in there, but I'm not going to say it is a clarinet sound, hence not quite naming it that way, but it will play the role of a clarinet. And in my opinion, when I use it, I find that I actually would rather use a synth sound like this. I find it more evocative in one of my mixes than just going, oh, let's get a clarinet sample and play it, because it just, I don't know, to me it frustrates me. Again, nice and subtle, will sit inside a mix and give you really nice melodies, counter melodies, things like that. orchestral kinds of tones. Some synthy sounds. But again, there's a subtlety inside a mix there, along with other instruments. You're going to get quite a usable sound from that. Again, very brassy. It does have a slightly dusty feel, but that little bit of inside the sound is going to help create a unique feel in a mix. Not for every situation. If you're just going, I want the absolute bog standard cliche, then grab that sound. Nice all-round brass with a lot of flexibility. Same thing. Again, it's all about subtlety. There's similarity in these sounds, but the idea is, remember, if we're going to play a chord, we don't actually want to play the chord this way. We want to play the chord this way, and then add another sound and another sound. So 3 of these together will give you this great big layer. If you're playing all the same notes, you might go, well, why don't I just put them in a combinator, Benedict? That's just easier. But one of the problems with modern mixers is that we tend to take that, oh, but that's just easier approach, when really we'd be better off saying, okay, I've got this sound, I've got this sound, and I've got this sound, and I put them together, and it's how they come together that they make something, because that's the essence of a band. That's the essence of an orchestra, a quartet, or any of those things. And interestingly enough, it's even the essence of an acoustic instrument, like a piano. You press one note on a piano, it sounds one way. You press 2 notes together on a piano, it actually sounds different. And rather than you just going, well, yeah, thanks, Captain Obvious, because you played 2 notes. But if you took those 2 notes, sampled them off, played them together, and then compared them to playing those 2 notes off the real piano at the same time, you'd find that they didn't sound the same. So Warm Meadows of Electronic Sounds is about saying, hey, we can actually build up much more interesting things. Again, not really 100% realistic, but inside a mix used carefully, you're going to get a really nice feel from that. You see, just with movement, I'm not suggesting you move that module in the middle. It's not meant for that. It's going to sound very synthy and weird, because brass tends not to do that. But with either slow movement, see how we've really essentially got 2 different sounds out of the one instrument. Will hear distortion there. That's what I was saying to you before. Most of these are designed to be played solo. We can take the distortion out, and that's okay, but it makes for a more realistic sound because we've got a lot of non-linear stuff happening in there. So lots of brasses. We'll move on. There are a few drums in there. I'm not going to mess with them. Guitars, they just happen to be there. They're the essentially the core sound set for the track Earth, the Humanity Problem from my Run from the Sun album. I know many people loathed it because it was different, but I kind of liked it because it was different. Pads, tons of these things, absolutely tons of these things. Will make for a beautiful sound with a good line inside a piece. Going to make a really beautiful sound. A little bit lumpy, but again, with care inside the mix, in the right situation, it's going to be absolutely gorgeous. A lot of these, as you realize, can double as melodic sounds as well. So. I just want oversized sounds. And this is why Europa features so much. There's so much tremendous ability for detail. And it's those little grady bits, those little extra bits. You probably notice quite a few of them in the brass. It's those little extra bits which actually make a sound seem more real. I know there's been this great big fashion to make everything perfect over the last couple of decades, but the problem with that is that music is in great part about those imperfections. You know, when Rod Stewart sings, his voice sounds like it was put through a grater. But it's that combination of those imperfections with his ability to use that, not only technically within his own throat, but, you know, in field, you know, he grabs you. Killing a Georgie is just like, oh my, you know, how sad for Georgie. But without it being in a kind of like, ooh, let's hop on my Me Too bandwagon. That's because we've got all those imperfections creating a greater perfection. So a lot of the sounds will rely on those elements of non-linear imperfection, because inside a mix, you can effectively achieve more with less. And of course, a lot of those sounds are not overly processed. I love a sound called cowbell salad. A nice line that's going to sit gorgeous in a mix. There are one or two of these more complex, whole sequence in a box thing, but I've tended to avoid them. There are lots of them out there in the market, and they sound great, but they're often difficult to build a useful piece of because there's so much going on. Nice evocative texture. You'd almost score a whole film off just that feel. I can't remember this one's like, but it's got a grand name. Yeah, I like it. I understand why I named it that way. There's something sort of, well, there is something grand, and it's almost like your incredibly rich old grandma who lives in a castle. It's a busy one. Oh, in case you were wondering, there's nothing happening over here. There's no secrets in the masters at all. Nice and uncomfortable. Ice and snow. Lots of movement, again on their own, may not be exciting, although they're great for if you're doing film or thematic type work, but within a mix, in the right situation, they work beauty. And very much so with these simpler sorts of sounds. It's easier when you're listening to patches and go, oh, well, I'll just pass off those sounds. And often as somebody who's looked at instruments, I've been frustrated in the past because a lot of times you hear people only audition the really complex, crazy patches. And yeah, you're like, oh, wow, that's cool, that's impressive. You know, it took you 8 hours to make that patch, but I can't use it. Whereas these ones, that's the kind of stuff that great music is made of. Because that shows off your chords, your melodic lines like nothing on earth. Combine that with something with a little bit of ping on the beginning and winning. Nasty ghasty. It's that. Reminds you of England. If you ever watched the TV cop show Vera, it's kind of like an audio version of that. Subtle, but there's plenty going on in the background of that one. So you can play it as a harsh sound, move it into a pretty sound. Just one of those really nice warm sounds which will show off what you're playing. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that music's about the sound that they've used, not realizing that sounds are kind of a dime a dozen, 256 of them in here. But the way you play and the way you put your sounds together is really where it's at. Which is why, you know, I was actually just watching. Whilst I was setting up for this, I was watching a video of Mark Knopfler, the guitarist from Dire Straits, and of course all the solo stuff. And he's a guy who really knows what he's doing. And while I don't play guitar, I will watch those sorts of things because it's great to be exposed to people who are that good and that professional. But you learn things, and the thing is that there are millions of guitarists, but there's only one guy who plays Mark Knopfler's stuff, and there's only one guy who plays Mark Knopfler's stuff right. It's what he plays, the chords, but even that's not it. It's how he plays them, how he articulates them, the instrument choices to create that feel. Like he walks through different guitars and how they influenced the creation of those particular lines. So sounds are important and they lead us, but at the same time it's the notes that actually separate us and how we play them. So just doing that, get somebody else to play that, it's going to sound different. Just as if you go down the boozer and you hear somebody else play Mark Knopfler or Eric Clapton or whatever, it doesn't sound the same. More often than it doesn't sound right at all because they're trying to do it on technicality rather than on the feel. So very much evocative feel will sit inside a more complex mix beautifully. This one. Has all the appropriate tuning problems rolled right in. He doesn't want some wobbly walls. Pianos, I'm an absolute sucker for making pianos. To some extent, I don't fully know why. Because I can't play the darn things. But at the same time, what's great with piano sounds is that you can have this huge amount of variety. And when they're well made, they have a huge amount of movement inside the one sound. Obviously some of them are waiting for sustain pedals and or effects. I'm a big fan of, rather than using pianos, in part because I can't play them as I say, to using things that are piano-like. Especially if, like me, you're not a particularly great pianoist. Because everybody tends to go, oh, I play piano because it's so pure. And it is that. It's a wonderful, powerful, clever instrument. But at the same time, everybody does it and everybody's playing it the same, everyone's mixing it the same. So, picking up sounds that are clearly pianos, but are not gives you an edge that the average person doesn't give themselves. There's in a lot of classic rock records, the piano sounds, if you were to pull them out and solo them, you'd be like, ew. And people make the mistake when they're covering those songs of trying to use better sounds and wondering why they don't really work. To me, that's a wonderful sound, and if I don't use that actual sound, because I'm prone to making new sounds in every single track, then I definitely would use that if they were there. There's a few things that use this sample, the phased out. It is a couple of semitones out of tune. I know that. That's how the sample got made. And it's also swapping the phases left to right, so it gives you this really broad stereo sound. But when you reduce it to mono, you will have issues. Letting you know it's there. It's not a faulty sample, it's a unique sample with special characteristics. So probably enough of those. Oh, of course, we've all got to hear the Vapor Blade. Again, with those preset perfect tuning problems. Sound effects. Things that were just on the wrong side of tuning to really make it into pads. I just want to score Logan's Run again. And understanding how the extra timbres work, Europa is just wonderful. It's not quite achieved the status that it should against some bigger names, but as a sound designer's instrument that's not overly detailed, yet able to deliver a huge amount of detail, it's just a joy to use. Enough of those. Strings, there are a few string sounds in here. Some of them are very synthy. And some, like I was saying to you with the brass section, are really designed to take the role of what you might otherwise use sample sets for. So if you're thinking, I want to use Albion, but I can't afford Albion, nothing against Spitfire. Spitfire do some beautiful work, just not easy to afford. Then perhaps look at patches like this, which are designed with the feel of strings, so if you play them right, you can get very nice work. And if you want to fatten them up, then rather than just automatically reaching to lots of compressors and lots of reverbs and making it sound like a synth, do as I said before, create all your separate lines, your melodies, counter melodies, just as you would with an orchestra. Create different versions of that patch, even put them together. So if you've got 4 of that patch playing around each other, you're going to have a really great sound. as you play it harder, we've got artifacting from the bow. Not a mistake, actually very deliberate. Sometimes you do just want to make big synthy sections, that's one of them. I know you may say, oh, but that doesn't sound like a cello, but what does a cello sound like? A cello can sound like an awful lot of things, from Satan vomiting through to very syrupy, and that's just one of those things that you can do with a cello. Obviously one of those character sounds. Combining, again, I'll play chords here because I haven't got several of these set up, but as you roll it into a mix based on notes and all of that, you start to get really nice nice sounds. A lot of those are essentially versions. So bringing out the harder sound of a or you can make it a lot prettier. Entirely up to you, but the fact that it gives you those options. One of the issues with synthesizers is that we can often only really optimize a patch for one, maybe two articulations. So rather than saying, oh, I want a sound that does everything, which is tempting to do, but it's lazy, we're better off saying, okay, I'll make a sound that delivers this articulation, and then I'll make another version of it that delivers that articulation. So as you move from one articulation to another, you're actually moving patches. The person won't hear it. But in the real world, that's essentially what you're doing. Your violinist or whoever is actually essentially changing the way their instrument sounds based on the articulation that they're doing. So don't feel bad or that you shouldn't do it. You actually should do it. Just nice big fat strings. Again, that slight scrape, the idea is that that does help pull them through the mix. If you find yourself going, oh, but the trouble with synth strings is they're always just so syrupy and they kind of disappear in the background, it's like, yeah, because you're not using them with the little scrape. The reason that the orchestral libraries sound good is because they managed to score to capture and use a lot of those little bits and pieces. I can't play that properly, but it's a sort of a spizzicato type thing. This is something I'm kind of fond of. So you can play. Now in reality, you would never play it that simply. Not quite realistic, but inside a mix, You'll be amazed what you can get away with. If you want to be lazy, it's got a quarter built in. It's also got so it's again not attempting to be the thing, but to emulate the thing. That really needs an arpeggiator to fire. Nice big glassy organ. Synthesizer is a bit of a catch-all. So general synthesizer sounds, you will find organs and so you don't have to go make friends with your priest. You can actually use Europa for organs. Some of these things you could use as pads, and vice versa. So it's just I've got to file them somewhere. Sometimes you can just get these really nice detailed sounds out of grain. Sometimes you really got to keep working and honing in on it, but you can get nice things. Various flutes. You will probably want to go in there and EQ that slightly, but I leave the noise in again because that's what the real thing does. And if you get rid of too much of that as you make the sound, then it sounds false in a mix. It gives you, in one instrument, quite a fair range of things that you can do. Then something that's going to sit really, really nicely inside a mix and be a character. Organ with this kind of swallowing sound. So that's from the intro. You'll notice often first time with these ones that have got the portamento in, the first time you play them they may scoop a bit. But once I get into the range that I'm playing in that section, then the scooping goes away. If it's a real issue for you, then you merely automate the portamento, which is here on this one, and so just set it to 0 or something for the first time that plays, and then for the rest of the piece it'll behave itself just fine. Very Dracula Frankenstein kind of stuff. different with pianos, but it's not. This one's similar. In this madness. I really like NXT. You know, I actually really like NN19 for that kind of stuff. I'm told they're supposed to be exactly the same filter, but I'm not convinced they are. So if you're interested, try opening one of these in NN19 and see how you go. I like the sound of that. Europa can give you this just lovely, lovely sounds. Yes, they're digital, but the movement and everything in them is just so warm and engaging. It's really gorgeous what it can do. Absolutely wasn't setting out to make that. I was in the middle of something else and it was like, ooh, hello. So of course it got saved off. There's plucks that everybody loves so much. You've got to have some care how you play this. It's a unique sound. Better if you can play without hitting lots of keys at once. Again, just some simple sounds. Sometimes really like using very simple sounds to build up what I'm doing, as I've said a lot of times, and sometimes I really like to use them as I'm working on melody, because when you work on melody with a really simple sound, it makes you work on the notes, like on the actual melody and the story that you're building, and the notes have to tell that story, rather than if you start out with a great sound, although that's relatively simple, but if you start out with a really complex sound, it often changes what you do and can also make you very lazy. Like this can make you lazy in notes, because you're going, ooh, I have to show people bits on the end. I'd far rather build a melody where I know the melody stands. Or what felt at the time displeasure of playing with a Yamaha V50, you'll know what that's about. They're actually really nice instruments, so don't entirely get me in the wrong way. It's just a lot of us were still trying to make it sound like a Jupiter 8, which it was never intended to do, and that sort of thin sound is not what we wanted. There are, as I said, a few sounds in here, very sort of simple sound set. They're really just tones. They're the samples from the Strat, Jane's Strat clone. That was the beginning of the Run album. I thought, oh, well, I have to have guitar sound to make guitars sing. I can't find a guitarist to actually play this. I used them once, maybe twice, and I didn't use them again. Not because they're terrible, they're actually kind of cool, and I do like Earth, and I like the sound that I got because of using those sounds. But being me and being a synthesist, it was like straight into using Europa and making it be very metal. But I shouldn't talk too much about that because everyone hated that record. So again, warm meadows of sand, very very grand name. But the emphasis is on those sounds that will sit inside a mix, really flatter the lines that you're playing, and or help you build up big layers that gives you this feeling of a very, very professional sounding mix without much expenditure. Thank you, and especially thank you if you've spent more than 1 minute and 79 seconds on my music. Sorry, 1.79 minutes, which is not exactly that, so well, less than 1.5 minutes anyway, because that's the average if you've spent more than that, and especially if you've gotten to the end. And thank you very much for taking the time and trouble. The reward for you is not that I'm going to give you free stuff, but I already have, because I've spent a lot of time explaining and really sometimes labouring points, but those are the points that will set you apart from those people that spend a minute or less looking at something, dismiss it, think they know everything, and then go and deliver exactly the same boring stuff that everyone else has. So if you've stuck with it and started to really understand what I'm talking about in the different playing styles, a different approach to building up your mixes, well done. Thank you.